Hello, everyone. We will regularly bring you stories you like. Ethan met my wife Layla through a common friend. They got along well and began spending time together. Often Ethan never actually threatened me. He was consistently friendly and polite. However, when sleeping with another person's wife, you are more cautious. They enjoyed sneaking around when I was at work or away, but for all the excitement, something was lacking. They informed me about it. Later on a December night, they resolved to finish the missing piece of their puzzle. Layla asked Ethan over to our house to play cards after dinner. They arrived at 8 p.m., and Layla greeted him enthusiastically. She hugged him, which I didn't find very strange. After all, they were friends first. We sat on the couch, and I got John a beer out of the fridge when I returned. Ethan and Layla were sitting together, holding hands, and she was resting them on his leg. "What is going on, guys?" I inquired, since their expressions suggested that they were about to bring bad news. "What, honey?" she said. "We need to tell you something, but we'd prefer that you sit down." I complied and sat down as she continued to explain. "Ethan and I have been in a sexual relationship for the past 2 months. You see, our chemistry was stronger than either of us. One thing led to another. We care for each other." She reasoned, "I care about you too, and I did not want to cheat on you. So we'd like to propose a proposition." Ethan picked up where Layla had left off. "We can't stop seeing each other. There is too much to ignore, but we wanted to make sure you were part of our little plan. We'll continue to have sex on a regular basis, but you'll be there to observe and maybe provide a hand here and there," he replied with a smile. Layla continued, "Actually, you'll have a lot of fun. I studied your browsing history, and I know you enjoy cuckold porn." She rolled her eyes when I read, "I spotted your browser searches, which were always looking up cuckold relationships and tips on Pornhub. So deep inside, I know it's exactly what you desire. To be honest, this will benefit our marriage." Ethan began again. "So all we require from you is a signed paper, simply a statement that all parties to the deal agree to these terms." I looked over the papers Layla had taken out of her purse. Some terms said that she and John would be free of any legal ramifications if the agreement did not work out. So I decided to file for divorce. Some points allowed for various kinds of physical contact, including kissing, cuddling, and even washing and sleeping together. I sat there with a dry mouth, unsure what to say. Layla asserted her point. "Look, I love you, but I also like John and what he can do for me. It's not personal. It's how he makes me feel. It is not something I can simply walk away from. I know he feels the same way about me." Ethan nodded in accord. "Please sign the contract, sweetheart. This is how things will be from now on." What was I supposed to do? I didn't want a divorce, but I wasn't sure how I'd respond to seeing Layla with another man. I gazed at them again, their hands still clasped, but now on her thigh. Layla stared at me intently and whispered, "Maybe this will persuade you to sign." I watched her draw John's face towards hers and kiss him. He responded by placing his hand on her cheek. Part of me could not believe what I was seeing. My wife was making out with another man. I didn't want to acknowledge it, but the longer they kissed, the more excited I grew. I attempted to walk away and cover up, but John saw right away. "Look, he likes it," he exclaimed. Layla held out her hand to me. I sighed as I looked at the contract. Pen in hand, I couldn't keep this from them, and I wasn't sure whether it was appropriate. And I've done a fair amount of research about Huckleberry. However it was, for a case I was working on. You know, I'm a private detective who works a lot of divorce cases, in addition to the security company that I own. Obviously, I hadn't done enough investigation, so I went into detective mode, which I'm sure they didn't anticipate. I took out my small recorder and pushed the record button to clarify I would like to record our talk to avoid future disagreements simply for my own peace of mind. Do you understand? There's a lot of legal jargon here. I noted that both of you had already signed and had them notarized. Yes, replied Ethan. We simply wanted to save time. We knew you'd agree to it. Geraldine, our notary will be here shortly to notarize your consent. Then we can enjoy ourselves. DB looked like a child at Christmas. Just to clarify, how long have you both been sleeping behind my back? I can't believe I didn't catch on, Layla squeaked. Well, we have been married for 4 1/2 years, and for the past 2 1/2 years, Ethan and I have been romantically involved. Please do not refer to it in such words. He is my kindred spirit. In fact, we've been in love all along now. I'm a little overzealous. Come on, Richard, don't be too self-absorbed. She is loving enough for both of us. I glanced at them and understood. My marriage had ended. I grabbed a pen, made my mark, and stood up. I hope this has satisfied you. I showed them the document that I had penned. The amino appears next to the signatures. Layla gasped as she looked over the document. Sorry, jerk, I am a poor sharer. Now look here, Ethan. I shook the beer bottle in my fingers, pressing my thumb against its mouth. Taking the contract, I folded it and placed it in my back pocket. Then I pointed the bottle at my soon-to-be ex-wife and the who used to be my friend. I'm removing my thumb from the neck. The torrent of liquid struck them both directly in the face. I turned, got my briefcase, laptop and jacket, and despite requests to return here and where I thought I was going, I opened the front door. I ran into Geraldine, the notary. This is your show. You must be Richard. Damn, you are not lying. I sat in my pickup truck and backed back to the start of the driveway. I engaged the drive and moved the wheels left, rolling across the lawn in front of the home, and through the rose bushes along the curb. I clipped the left rear panel of the Lexus that fall. I know I behaved like an adolescent. So persuade me, fortunately, he was still alive. I drove to her parents' place. I decided to take a proactive approach, and as much as I loved my relatives, I was not going to be the bad guy. And why the mobile phone was ringing with mails and texts. My email eventually became filled, and the calls and texts ceased. I drove up to her parents' house and got out. I rang the doorbell and was quickly heard. All right, okay, I'm coming. The porch, light turned on, and there I was, face to face with her father, Judge Thomas Smith. Appeared to be in an unpleasant temper. Richard, what exactly are you doing here at this hour, and where is Layla? I do not know where she is. Damn for sure, not on this goddamn planet. My in-laws always showed me love and respect, despite having a son in addition to my soon-tobe ex-wife. I handed the judge the contract and put my tiny recorder on the kitchen table. What the hell is this, Reed? This I said. He began reading, and his eyes widened. Is that true? He asked. I turned on the recorder, and it all started when I asked if I might record the talk to minimize confusion while she played it. His wife listened in, and then the robe she was keeping closed opened, and her hand reached for her face, covering her mouth. She gasped, and the robe slipped open, showing her stunning black nightshirt. Well, I assumed his evening was wrecked. He finished reading and looked at me. I don't see a way around this. Do you? How would you handle my situation? His eyelids lowered, and he moaned. I understand, son. Right then. Their old-fashioned home phone rang. His wife answered. Hello, imagine Richard is present. I need to speak to him right now. Her father grabbed the phone receiver. What's happening? Silly, do you both have any sort of problem? The other end of the line let out a scream, followed by astonishment. Dad, what are you talking about? This doesn't affect either you or Mum. This is just about me and my husband. You need to obtain the contract that explains this, otherwise you've made this a family problem. I overheard cries and knew they know. Her father spoke into the phone. Hello, Layla, and hung up. Dad looked at me and said, Go get some rest, then do what you need to do. Don't do something dumb. Understood? Yes, sir. I'm really sorry for anything. This is not your fault, son. Sometimes a snake simply slithers into the garden. I departed, got into my truck, drove to the Hampton Inn hotel, and signed in. For 1 week, I began destroying the minibar, then collapsed in the bathroom, puking all over the floor. I dragged myself fully dressed into the shower and rinsed with the hose. Before stripping off and slumping on the bed, I fell into a realm of dreams. The next morning, I awoke and pulled myself together. I realized I didn't have any clean clothes, so I called another close buddy of mine, Gerald Ool, the one who was not sleeping with my wife, and I ordered him to get something fresh and bring it to our hotel room, 819. He was apprehensive about what was going on, so I promised him I'd explain everything. Once he came, grab a few egg MCM and plenty of coffee. Hurry up, buddy. Then I contacted my office and directed 2 of my best guys to begin surveillance on the I phoned the bank and froze all of my accounts, personal and business. I cancelled all of our joint credit cards after they were paid off next. I called and deactivated her cell phone as part of my business plan with the company before calling to have all of our utilities turned off. When I called my lawyer friend, she recommended a divorce attorney. My brother is very good. If you want to maximize carnage, tell him I sent you. Apparently it's a safe bet and could be a watershed moment. I called her brother, and Gerald arrived shortly after I got dressed, and we went grocery shopping for breakfast. I briefed him on yesterday's events, while also informing my future lawyer about what happened and what I wanted. He instructed me to come to his office with all necessary documents around 3:00 p.m. We will strategize there. Gerald could not believe his ears. I can't believe she can do that. Not just for deception, but to propose a written contract that is notarized, nothing less. Tell me about it. I still need to do a few more things. I will contact you later and fill you in. Not a problem, buddy. I never completely trusted Ethan, and I guess I now understand why, if you need anything at all. Astrid and I are always here as his 10-year wife, always treated me as if I were her younger brother after he left. I looked in the mirror. I don't look good. Definitely an improvement over yesterday. The day I went to the bank, I was immediately taken to the senior vice president's office. I'm not a billionaire, but the total amount of money in my personal and business accounts was significant. He lunged at me. I do not understand your actions. Of course, this is your money, and you can do whatever you want. Is there anything we can do to change your mind? Guess where Ethan worked? He was a senior financial consultant at the bank. So I placed the contract on the vice president desk and activated the recorder. His eyes clouded as he read the contract, but when he realized what he was reading and hearing his face turn pink and transparent, surely this is some kind of joke if it is. I am not laughing. I can't do business with an institution that employs a jerk who is sleeping with my wife behind my back. My voice rose to a low roar, and I'm sure the entire staff heard everything. I took the contract from his trembling hands and grabbed the dictaphone. I'm curious how many other clients have been treated the same way. Please notify Ethan Samuels that legal documents will soon be served on him. Have a nice day, sir. I turned and walked away as I passed his office. I overheard him bark, "Bring Samuels here immediately." I chuckled, then I stopped at the stationery store and printed 3 copies of the contract. I decided not to show the original to anyone until my lawyer had received it. Then I visited my insurance agent Guess, whose future ex-wife worked there. Miss the owner escorted me to her office. Daphne Laurier, I thought. I heard a muffled Richard as I walked through their office. "This is great," I smiled, miss. When I entered, Laurier stood up and shook my hand. Richard, nice to see you. What can we do for you? She appeared nervous and out of her element. I suppose you understand why I'm here, Daphne. I am cancelling all of my insurance with your company effective immediately, and I would appreciate receiving a re-M check right now. I refuse to do business with anyone who would hire a lying, cheating. Just a moment, Richard. Your personal feelings have no bearing on the way my company does business. I have not seen or heard anything. I tossed a copy of the contract on her desk and stared at her. Do you have to listen to the tape recording? She skimmed the 3 pages and briefly examined the notary stamp and signature. A tremor shook her upper body. Just a moment, please. She pressed the interc button. Layla, could you please come into my office right now? A few seconds later, his visibly shaken future ex-wife entered the office. Yes, Miss Loria. Layla, you're fired. Please clear your desk and leave immediately. Layla staggered and then fainted. Several people approached and crowded around her. Loria stood up and asked if my decision was still valid. I stood up to shake her hand. It has been a pleasure working with a highly ethical professional. I believe I can leave my business where it is. I turned left, stepping over my ex-wife who was lying on the floor, and went to the lawyer's office. My attorney's name was Nathaniel Sampson. He was slightly older than me, but appeared younger. He was sharp. He invited me into his office, asked if I wanted anything to drink, and requested that his secretary bring us some water. Now, Richard, I've spoken with my sister, and she seems to think I'll enjoy this. So what have you got? I completed the original contract, and then turned on my tea recorder. The recording ended, and he listened to it, but he appeared to be more interested in the contract when it was all finished. He pressed the intercom button. His legal assistant secretary had entered. Bethany, take this tape recording and make 2 copies, then place the original in Mr. Daniels' safe, replace the cassette, and return the dictaphone. He returned to reading on occasion. He gave me a sideways glance. Finally, he put down the contract and looked at me. This is for real, right? Nobody could have come up with something like this. He took a brief pause before returning my gaze. All right, so what would you like to do? I want to crucify them. I want to cause them so much pain that they are unable to work or live a public life together. I want them to pay big money. He smirked slightly and smiled at me. I've never seen anything like this in my life. I would not turn down the opportunity to be a part of this for anything. The first thing we'll do is bring in a notary and question her. I've worked with her before, and I believe she will be cooperative. We'll have our own notary here, and everything will be done properly. The tape will then be verified for authenticity and put to good use. We will fight for and win a jury trial. I said, I believe they have both lost their jobs already. I caused a stir at both the bank and her workplace. Even better, if we just increase the pressure. If we get a jury trial, I'll represent the public interest. I already like this. That's the thing. They have no basis for slander or defamation. We have evidence that everything they said was correct. As long as we adhere to the facts, they will be unable to do or say anything. Light gradually dawned on me. They dug their own graves. We brought in a notary, and once everything was set up for her, she went after them. She confirmed that they wanted to have their cake and eat it too. Nathaniel scheduled a meeting with the judge to present our case. He shook his head and gazed at me. I sympathize with you, Mr. Daniels. If I can, I will do everything in my power to put things right. But are you certain you want the jury to hear this? My lawyer intervened, my client. Your Honor seeks maximum pain and suffering. For the woman who is still technically his wife, as well as the man with whom she was involved, he wants to annul their marriage and leave her with nothing, absolutely nothing very good. Counselor, prepare it and see if the other parties agree. We notified the other 2 and instructed them to sign the documents or hire a lawyer. They held They were almost broke because their utilities had been turned back on, and they were unemployed, but she refused to sign, and he was banking on a hefty payout. Finally, they hired a shady individual to represent them. They did not discuss the contract or the recording with her lawyer. We scheduled a meeting at my lawyer's office to clarify everything. My lawyer checked the recording for timing and sound authenticity. We were prepared. They arrived at 11:01 a.m., accompanied by her father. I was slightly surprised and concerned. I shouldn't have done this. Layla approached me as if about to embrace. I pushed back against her advances and mocked my former friend. She started by saying that all of this was a big misunderstanding and that I brought down a holy hell upon them both. They both lost their jobs, were almost broke, and had no prospects for the future. I formalized a waiver of claims and handed over the house to her, but without money, they were quickly sinking. They tried to put it up for sale, but luck wasn't on their side. She wanted me back in her life, in her bed, and most importantly, in her bank account. My lawyer responded with a question: "Are you still dating Mr. Samuels?" Her lawyer stated that it was irrelevant to the discussion. "They're just friends," with those words. My lawyer pulled the contract from his stack of documents and placed it in front of the guy. "Let him try this again." He stood facing Layla as her lawyer read the document. "Are you still dating Mr. Samuels?" She paled and almost fainted. "I don't think I want to answer that question. It's too personal." "That's fine, Miss Farrell. You'll be able to answer it on oath in court." I felt increasingly self-satisfied watching their lives fall. Her lawyer finished reading the deal, and he looked like he was ready to be sick. "You never mentioned this before," he exclaimed. He turned to my lawyer. "These are all rumors. You have no real evidence." That's when my lawyer delivered a sworn affidavit from Miss Geraldine Schultz, their notary. He provided it to the lawyer, along with a signed and notarized statement from me outlining what was stated and required. Then he generated the audio recording. "This is admissible in court, as your clients knew what was happening and actively agreed to it." My guy clicked the play button, and their whole world came crumbling down. Their lawyer looked worried. It was then that her father, the judge, spoke up and sorted everything. He slammed his fist on the table and stared aggressively at her lawyer. "That's enough, Layla. Mr. Hoodie, you're fired." Layla signed the blank. "And put your head out of your ass. Samuels, I need you out by tomorrow evening. Take note that you are designated as a respondent. In the divorce case, you should seek legal assistance before Richard rules against you and Layla. I recognize that you will get nothing out of this. I believe if you go to court, you will receive even less. My wife and I are disgusted with you in your behavior. Your brother refuses to bring his wife and children into our home as long as you are around, so you better look for another place to stay. Samuels is your kindred soul, and you prefer him to your husband. So maybe it will work out for both of you." I overheard him whisper, "I sincerely hope not. Layla's parents were paying her legal fees, so she signed everything." While Samuel sprang up and raced out of the room, he disappeared from the face of the world. I have nothing to do with the cough. 3 months later, I was the only one sleeping on my bed, and I was a lonely man. Well, that happened last night. The Jones sisters promised to cheer me up tonight and all day tomorrow. Life is good. Here is the next story. Steve, a 25-year-old bachelor, worked as a general laborer for a major construction business. His muscular figure was the consequence of daily hard lifting and frequent visits to a local gym. My Mike, his close friend, was a brilliant vehicle technician who worked in his father's shop and had a passion for cars. Since he was in kindergarten on July 1st, Mike was asked to a Canada Day party by a devoted client, hesitant to attend alone, and without his fiancée, He persuaded Steve to accompany him. Steve, who had no plans for the evening, agreed. Mike mingled at the backyard party, which included a makeshift dance floor on the patio, loud music, and plenty of drink. Steve sat quietly in a corner, nursing his beer. A young woman, evidently inebriated, came over and flopped into a chair near him quickly. Downing her beer and burping apologies, she murmured to Steve, "Take it easy. There is plenty of time." Steve replied calmly, "I am celebrating." She declared, "We are all celebrating." Steve remarked, "No, I am celebrating." She stressed, "All right. Are you celebrating?" Steve murmured, smiling to himself, anticipating the upcoming hiccups. "Yes, I am celebrating my breakup with my ex-boyfriend. She stated he cheated on me," before staggering to the dance floor and struggling to move to the music. Steve sat with his beer watching as two men from the patio joined the young woman on the dance floor. After a while, she left to buy a whiskey, giving him a smile and toast before drinking it. He shook his head at her audacity before she resumed dancing. The two males moved closer, almost encroaching on her space. "Hey, why are you still sitting here?" Mike nudged Steve. "Go mingle. There are a lot of girls around, and they are all eager." Steve looked around the dance floor, but couldn't see the woman or the men. He sprang from his seat. "What's happening?" Mike inquired, confused. "I'm ordering another beer," Steve replied, already walking towards the bar. Steve surveyed the surroundings in all directions, but his efforts were useless. Then he approached the front of the home. Cars were parked in the driveway, and 100 men down the street, hidden in the shadows. He observed someone kneeling near the open car door. He approached cautiously and watched a situation that made him angry in the automobile. One man was holding her down while the other attempted to do something. Despite her efforts to resist, the state of intoxication rendered her helpless. "Leave her alone and go out of here." Steve's voice sounded thunderous. "Come on, man, if you don't like it. Simply leave the man standing by the automobile who was approaching." Steve responded, You are welcome to participate in the fun." Steve reacted swiftly. He kicked the man hard, prompting him to scream and lean over. Then Steve tightened his fist and pounded the man with all his power. The attacker then lost consciousness. Meanwhile, a larger man lunged at Steve. Despite his stature, Steve avoided a direct shot to the face and countered with a strong punch to his attacker's gut. The hit knocked Steve to the ground, where the attacker grabbed his shirt and hurled him into a nearby car. When Steve hit the front door of the car, and the attacker raised his foot to throw another strike. Steve immediately swerved to the side, narrowly escaping the blow that cracked the car window. Steve took advantage of the situation, delivering a powerful kick to the man's vulnerable left leg, forcing him to lose his equilibrium and collapse. Steve then attacked the victim, striking him and stabbing him numerous times until he became unconscious. Steve turned his attention to the young woman and helped her recover before carefully raising her in his arms and carrying her to his car, where she sat in the passenger seat. He examined her pockets and discovered a key bearing the phrase Eglinton Heights. Steve, who was familiar with the city's layout from his job on several construction projects, wasted no time getting to the indicated building. When he arrived, he parked in the guest parking lot. Steve woke her up and asked for her apartment number. "What is your room's number?" Steve yelled out for 12. She muttered. Steve held her as he led her to the 4th floor once. Into her room, he softly sat on the bed and went to the bathroom. He fetched a bucket and went to the kitchen to make a mixture of salt and sugar dissolved in water, coaxing her to drink some. He kept the bucket close at hand. Suddenly, she convulsed and vomited into the pail. Steve wiped her mouth and helped her calm down. 15 minutes later, he repeated the procedure with the drink, resulting in another bout of vomiting. After numerous incidents, Steve undressed her and led her into the bathroom where he poured cold water over her. She lacked the strength to resist after wiping her off. He tucked her into bed and covered her with a blanket. Steve then took a seat by the bed and watched over her while she slept. She awoke in the early morning, feeling uneasy and staring at the ceiling. I attempted to piece together the events of the previous night. Her heart began hammering when she recognized Steve sitting across from her. When she removed the blanket, she saw that she was not dressed. "You attacked me," she yelled. "Calm down." Steve rose. "I actually stopped 2 men from attacking you. Who 2 dudes? And why am I naked?" Then she spotted Steve's bruised knuckles and the redness on his face. "It is time to leave. I encourage you to relax and avoid consuming alcohol." Steve exited the room as she gradually regained clarity. She remembered parts of the previous night, a party with high alcohol intake. 2 men dragged her into a car. There was a scuffle glass. "Brokey saved me." She hopped out of bed, quickly put on pants and a t-shirt, and dashed out of the room. In the hallway, she heard the elevator door close. She rushed down the stairs and out onto the street. Unfortunately, it was too late. All she saw was a young man driving away in a red Dodge Daytona. The next Saturday evening, Steve and Mike were drinking beers at the local bar when Mike's phone called after listening to the caller. He asked Steve, "Do you know Trisha?" "No." Steve responded by taking another sip of his beer. "Someone on the call claims to know. You best wishes, pal, but you don't know her name." Mike explained, "Is she looking to sell something?" Steve wondered. "Ma'am, I apologize, but my companion does not recognize you, and if this is a sales call, we are not interested." Mike responded on the phone. Following a little break, he resumed, "She mentioned attending a party last week, and you're taking her home. Her name is Trisha. I never asked." Steve remarked, picking up the phone. "Is there anything I should know?" Mike inquired, smiling. Steve shakes his head. "Hello, Trisha. What can I do for you this time?" Steve inquired. "Hi, first and foremost. I'd like to thank you for what you did last time. Without you, I'm not sure where I'd be or what state I'd be in right now." Trisha expressed gratitude. "I simply did what was necessary to assist someone in need." Steve modestly said, "No, you did something no one else would. You're my rescuer and hero." Trisha insisted, "Thank you. In the future, you should be more responsible." "Okay," Steve advised. "Yes, I do understand. I've been excellent since the party and intend to stay that way." Trisha reassured, "Great, by the way, how did you get Mike's number?" "I went to the house where the party was hosted and asked whether anyone knew you. I offered your description and the vehicle you were driving, but no one had any information this morning. The party's host called me and suggested that you may be Mike's acquaintance, and he gave me his phone number." "All right, Trisha. It was a pleasure talking with you. I'm genuinely drinking beer with Mike." "Are you available for supper tomorrow?" Trisha interrupted. "I just want to convey my gratitude in person." Trisha added, "Sure, I will take your number from this phone and call you tomorrow morning. By the way, my name is Steve on Sunday evening." They met for dinner at an upscale restaurant. They avoided discussing the party's events, instead focusing on themselves and their occupations. Trisha worked as a data entry clerk for a supply chain corporation, then they went for a walk. Finally, Steve drove her home. "Thank you very much for this lovely evening." "Steve, my hero." Trisha kissed Steve on the cheek before exiting the car. He watched her walk to the building's main entrance before driving away. 2 weeks later, Steve called Trisha and invited her to join him for a movie after a brief Trisha admitted that she had been looking forward to his call. "I was waiting for yours too." Steve stuttered after the movie. Steve LED. Trisha back to her apartment, where she invited him in for coffee. In the cozy living dining room, Steve noticed a flyer for a tattoo shop on the table. "I've been thinking about getting a tattoo on my lower back," Trisha explained as she brought over 2 steaming cups of coffee. "You do not need a tattoo," Steve replied. "But I was thinking, I love your body." "Exactly as it is," Steve interjected. "Yes, you have seen me naked." Steve drew closer, planting a gentle kiss on her lips before pulling away. He locked eyes with her someday. "I'll have to thank those 2 guys." Trisha hugged him tight. Steve stroked her back, bringing her closer to him. He gently licked her ear, sending goosebumps down her back before showering her with kisses. Steve picked up Trisha in his arms and carried her to bed. Everything happened too quickly, and here they were, following the first round. "Are you prepared for the second round?" he whispered. She replied, "I'm ready, until we both run out of steam." Steve maintained his composure and advanced to the second round. After several months of dating, they decided to tie the knot. They found a cozy 2-bedroom townhouse to rent and made it their own. Their joy knew no bounds as they embarked on this adventure together. A year later, Steve ran into his old schoolmate Billy in a shopping mall. Billy was networking and handing out business cards to folks. "Hello, Billy. It has been a long time," Steve greeted. "Hello, Stephen. We were youngsters when we last caught up," Billy responded. "What have you been up to?" Steve inquired. "I've changed careers since then. I was let go from my last job." Billy explained. "Sorry to hear this. So what do you do now? I saw you handing out cards." Steve observed. "I'm self-employed and sell insurance." Billy replied. "I'm a little lost." Steve admitted. "I'm not affiliated with any company I work on. Commission, selling life insurance and investments." Billy clarified. "Got it?" Steve nodded. "Have you married any children?" Billy asked. "I work for a construction firm." "Yep, married but no children yet. How about you?" Steve answered. "Married as well. No children for me either." Billy shared. "Great catching up." "Billy, I've got to run. My wife is waiting." Steve stated. "Before you go, ever considered life insurance? What if something happens to you? Or if you have children?" Billy inquired. Steve said, "Honestly, it never crossed my mind. This is a common oversight. Here is my card. Talk to your wife, then call me. I'd be pleased to stop by and talk. We normally hold these meetings at home with both spouses. It's called a kitchen table conversation. I will explain everything concerning protection and future plans." Billy emphasized that he would answer any queries you may have. "All right, I will contact you soon," Steve replied by placing the card into his pocket. That evening after dinner, Steve told Trisha about Billy and advised they both take his advice on life insurance and security. Trisha was unimpressed because of the added monthly fee. "We will listen to him and then make a decision." Steve comforted his wife. "We can plan to meet him here next week, the following week." Billy paid a visit to Steve and Trisha and explained the difference between term and whole life insurance. He also suggested they start investing for their retirement. Finally, Billy suggested a joint term life insurance coverage customized to their protection needs while they were still young. Monthly premiums would be modest. A few days later, Billy came with the policies to complete the transaction. Before leaving, he solicited references and offered Trisha his business card. 3 months later, Trisha called Steve at his employment. "Hello, honey, I'll need to work some overtime this week, and I'll be done about 8 tonight." "All right, don't worry. I'll prepare dinner and wait for you." "Thank you, sweetie. You are so thoughtful." After dinner, Trisha discussed the recent rise in workload and the company's unwillingness to hire extra employees. She worked extra hours 3 times that week. 2 weeks later, she was required to work another overtime shift. Steve did not protest and instead prepared dinner. 6 months later, Steve was sent to a building site near Trisha's workplace around noon. He made the snap decision to invite her to lunch. When he arrived at her office, he was informed that she had just left for lunch and spotted her car in the parking lot. Steve suggested that she might have strolled to a neighboring restaurant, recalling a pleasant memory from their courting days when he had invited her to lunch at a small pizzeria. He took off running after only a 5-minute walk. Steve noticed Trisha walking towards the pizzeria and sought to call out to her, but the traffic blocked out his voice as he entered the restaurant. He noticed Trish and Billy seated at a table. "Hello," Steve said Billy, trying to grin. Trisha's initial disbelief swiftly turned to a smile. "I came here to get some pizza and ran into Steve." "Hello, Billy." Steve responded, still bewildered. "I'm finishing up and need to rush Billy up," and shook Steve's hand, saying, "I have a meeting with potential clients in 15 minutes. Nice to see you." Trisha Billy approached the counter, and Steve sensed his anxiety as he paid and engaged in a serious chat with the clerk. The clerk looked up twice at Steve and Trisha. "I worked close and thought I'd stop by to visit you and take you to lunch." Stephen informed Trisha, "You should have phoned me. I would have waited for you." "Sweetie." Billy passed their table, he waved goodbye, and went outside to get into a shiny new automobile. "Wow, he's making great progress in his new job," Steve remarked while seeing his pal speed away. "Should we order?" Trisha inquired with a frightened tone in her voice. "Is everything okay, Trisha?" "Absolutely. I only have 20 minutes left for lunch," she said. On a Monday evening, while Trisha worked late, Steve decided to look into their costs to determine their monthly savings potential. "It's about time we bought a home." He hesitated, understanding they needed a large down payment. Trisha handled all of the paperwork, which was perfectly kept in the bottom drawer, and no one wanted to wait for her. Steve went into previous bank statements, methodically recording expenses. After an hour, he discovered areas where he might cut back on returning paperwork. He took a drink from the kitchen to evaluate his results. He got a sudden realization and returned to the drawer. He analyzed the statements. Trisha's income hadn't altered in over a year. What happens to her throughout time? Steve wondered, something does not add up. For the past 6 months, she has been working extra hours, virtually, only wears the extra money. Steve opened another beer as he restored the paperwork to their proper position. "I'm wondering if she's stashing the overtime income somewhere else, or if she's not actually working those extra hours later." Steve heard Trisha's car reverse into the driveway when she entered the house. Steve was drinking another beer. "You appear fatigued, hun," Steve remarked. "This job is exhausting me. Why don't you look for one that's less demanding?" "You know how difficult it is to find a good-paying job these days," she responded. "When is your next overtime?" "On Wednesdays and Friday days. As usual, I will reheat the dinner." Steve got up and went to the fridge. As they went to bed, Trisha slipped straight into a deep sleep. Steve, on the other hand, lay awake, considering a single question in his thoughts: was his wife unfaithful? The next day he called Mike. He only trusted one guy. "Hello, Mike. I need to meet with you this afternoon." He spoke with a somber tone. Mike sensed his friend's distress. "I agreed without hesitation. Let us catch up at the pub on Wednesday evening." Both buddies sat in Mike's automobile, across from Trisha's office where her car was parked. They had been waiting for 1 hour. Finally, 3 women, including Trisha, exited from the building and drove to their automobiles. "Let's wait and see if any men emerge." Steve suggested they wait 15 minutes, but no male showed. Steve then texted Trisha and went to buy some beer. When Steve got home with a pack of beer, he discovered Trisha had already set the table. Mike was the only one who observed Trisha's activities on Friday evening, and he was in continual communication with Steve. As usual, Trisha drove straight home later that night when she was sleeping. Steve took her cell phone and went through all of the texts and calls on Saturday. The two pals regrouped to strategize. I went through her phone and found nothing odd. Steve informed Mike she's probably wiping everything down. Mike speculated you might be right. Look, Steve, if you're serious about finding out the truth, you'll need to follow her every move every day, but you do not have the time or skill for it. So your best choice is to hire a private investigator, but this will come at a cost. What more could I do? Steve inquired. I've got an idea. Follow me. Mike accompanied Steve to an electronics store and recommended that he purchase 3 voice-activated recorders with long-lasting batteries. That afternoon, Steve carefully placed one in the kitchen near the home phone, one in the bedroom, and one under Trisha's car's seat. Later, as they went to bed, Trisha attempted to initiate intercourse with her husband, but Steve declined, citing weariness following a difficult week. Trisha, disheartened, turned away and slept. The next morning, Steve went to the gym as usual. When he returned, he found a message from Trisha saying that she had gone out for some errands. Steve suspected something was wrong and checked the recording equipment in the kitchen. Aside from ordinary home sounds, there was nothing significant. However, replay from the bedroom gadget shows Trisha having a one-sided phone call. Hi, can we speak? She's in the backyard, good. I miss you too, honey. He's been to the gym. He will be back by noon. So yes, I am looking forward to this coming Wednesday. Of sure, I'll wear the black underwear you gave me. She chuckled. You're correct. This is the benefit of having flex time at work. Where will you take me this time? You will confirm tomorrow. But don't take me to Motel 6 like the last time. I do not like it. Okay, I need to leave. Now I'll talk to you tomorrow. Love you, Steve. Struggled with the recent revelation. He discovered he was being cheated on, but he had no idea who Trisha's lover was, except that he was married. This insight explained why Trisha was never compensated for overtime. They were having extramarital relationships on Wednesdays, often meeting at Motel 6. Steve dashed to the bedroom, stashing a recorder in its normal hiding place. Rummaging through drawers, he discovered suggestive lingerie hidden among Trisha's stuff. Outraged by the deception, he vowed to reveal the man's identity and their impending plans. Steve sought Mike's assistance, briefing him on his discoveries that evening. Steve pretended to be exhausted in order to hide his distress. He couldn't sleep because he was afraid Trisha's lover might contact her at work on Monday morning. While Trisha was in the bathroom, Steve grabbed the recorder from the kitchen and discreetly placed it in the bottom of her handbag. This might do the trick. He thought throughout the day. Steve's thoughts were preoccupied with Trisha and her secret meeting. He devised many methods to prepare for the worst-case scenario of tailing them using a car borrowed from Mike's shop on Wednesday. When Steve returned home in the afternoon, he spotted Trisha bustling about in the kitchen. He retreated to the bedroom room without hesitation, retrieving a recorder that had been neatly hidden within her handbag. Next, he gently removed her car keys and retrieved another recorder placed behind the car seat. Preferring to listen to the latter, first expecting hours of recordings on the one from her bag. He informed Trisha, I'll be listening to music on my computer. Give me a heads up when dinner is ready. He wore headphones and spent around 30 minutes engaged in the morning trip to her workplace, catching the hum of the engine and the chatter of the radios. Then a brief silence was broken by the opening and closing of a door, followed by Trisha's voice. I'm sorry I couldn't pick up sooner. My boss was present, and things got frantic. Lake Simcoe, a lakeside cabin with its own private beach. That seems fantastic. It belonged to one of your customers? Billy, you're doing tremendous business. Steve's expression deepened as he kept listening. Perhaps one day, I'll join you and sell insurance. Yes, there are also investments. I guarantee you, Billy, that this time you will have my whole attention. I've kept it safe from Steve. It will be yours alone as usual. I'll park my car in the same location and travel with you. I need to get back to work immediately. Bye, sweetie, with increased clarity about Trisha's affair and their planned meeting. Steve called Mike right away after dinner. He told Trisha he was going to the pub to meet Mike for a drink. Make sure you are not late. Trisha reminded her husband in truth. Both friends met in a parking lot after Steve revealed everything to Mike. The latter asked about his scheme. I considered shocking them on their return trip by providing them 4 flat tires. They should have planned their departure from Lake Simcoe so Trisha could get home around her usual time from work. It would be stressful for them. By the time she got home, I'd already left with all of my belongings. I'll send a recording to Billy's wife and hire a cheap lawyer to divorce her. It's a good plan. But someone needs to tell them to locate the cabin and discreetly tamper with all of the tire valves. Mike reminded Steve, I know it's complicated, but I can't think of anything else. What kind of car does he have? Mike inquired. Stephen informed him that crappy thing. Why, Mike exclaimed, What do you mean? Stephen was perplexed. You will see, I believe that model will be recalled in a few months. Why, Steve inquired, there is an issue with the suspension. A few loose bolts could ruin the car. Steve grinned. You are not suggesting yes, that's just what we need. Can you ensure they become stuck there? Lake Simcoe is over 100 miles from Toronto. With my skills, I can slightly loosen the bolts, so after about 150 mi, everything will begin to shake, and the jerk will be forced to stop in confusion. He'll need to call for a tow, but how can I pull it off? I've got an idea. Steve smirked cunningly. By the time Steve arrived home, Trisha had fallen asleep. He went to look for Jerk's business card on Tuesday morning. Steve called Billy from work and asked if he could stop by that evening for investment advice, because he had some money to invest, although Billy had a client appointment at 7:00 p.m. Steve, who initially wanted to reschedule, insisted. Billy eventually agreed to come over at 9 p.m. Steve promptly texted Trisha about Billy's visit, requesting investment advice during lunch. Trisha called Steve to express her concerns about their savings habits and inquire about his investment strategy. Hey, I was going to surprise you, but since you asked, I expect a significant raise. Soon Steve responded. That is fantastic. We should celebrate, Steve. Attempted enthusiasm. Yes, we will discuss it. Trisha responded. Am I still your hero? Steve inquired. Of course you are. Trisha affirmed, lying. A little, Steve reflected after hanging up. Billy showed up at the house later that evening around 9:00 p.m. Steve welcomed him in, and Trisha greeted her lover warmly, going unnoticed by the couple. Steve turned off the exterior lights, the three of them sat down, and Billy began explaining the benefits of mutual funds all at once. Mike parked on the street and walked over to Billy's car, which was equipped with a professional lift service. Jack in the darkness, he went unnoticed. He quickly raised the car, slipping underneath with a wrench and a cloth to cover his tracks. Precisely, he knew which bolts to loosen and concealed them with the cloth to avoid any obvious signs Steve detected. Silent communication between them, even noticing their subtle foot contact beneath the table while pretending not to notice, Steve continued the conversation. Billy chose a few investment options and left brochures on the table. Steve retrieved 2 beers. He overheard murmurs behind him and received a text message from Mike. Mission accomplished. Steve grinned. You mentioned your wife's workplace previously, but it slipped my mind. Steve avoided Billy's gaze. Jenny works for RBC Royal Bank of Canada in downtown U2. Make Whitey the teammate. If I don't invest with you, I might as well invest with your spouse after finishing his beer. All three chuckled together. Steve promised his friend that he would review the brochures and his suggestions and call back in a few days to confirm everything. After Billy left, Steve poured himself a glass of whiskey. "Would you like some wine, darling?" Steve inquired about Tricia. "Are you aware that I no longer drink alcohol?" Tricia retorted, nearly shouting. "I understand, just checking." Steve responded, "And you know you can't handle combining beer and whiskey. I am just celebrating, honey, so if you get too drunk tonight, please sleep on the couch," Tricia said, turning to head upstairs to her bedroom. Steve pushed his chair back and sat down, his gaze never leaving the glass in front of him, which he had not touched. His mind raced as he replayed the scene involving his wife and her lover. In his mind, he realized that his marriage had ended. He sat for an hour thinking. In the end, he poured most of the whiskey into the sink, leaving only a small amount in the glass standing at the kitchen sink. He rinsed his mouth with the remaining whiskey. When he went into the bedroom, he discovered Tricia asleep on her stomach, wearing her usual t-shirt. He lifted her t-shirt and kissed her suddenly. Tricia awoke Steve. "What are you up to? Relax, baby, it's okay." Tricia tried to leave, but Steve would not let her. "You smell of alcohol. Leave me alone." "No." Tricia defended herself. "Stop it. I am your husband and protector. I have every right. Please, darling. I am so tired. I have a difficult day tomorrow. We can do it another time." "A full day with your beloved? Correct?" Steve was enraged. Repeating these phrases to himself, he decided he could go further, so he wanted what every man desires. Tricia pleaded, "Please don't do this to me after a few minutes." Steve reclined, satisfied. Why would you do this to me? Are you with your wife?" Tricia began crying. "I've wanted to do this for a long time, and you've always refused me." Steve replied coldly. He allowed her to go to the bathroom where he heard her crying. "She is crying because I did it before her lover did." Steve chuckled to himself. He followed Tricia into the bathroom and stood beside her under the running water. However, as soon as he entered, she left after cleaning himself up. He returned to the bedroom and discovered Tricia curled up in the fetal position. "You hurt me," Tricia sobbed. "Hush," Steve muttered while hugging her and attempting to calm her down. "Do not touch me," she exclaimed firmly, pushing his hand. "Away." Steve chose to go for the second round. "You are mine, I am marking you as my property," he declared. Tricia, confused, remained silent. Then he advanced to the second round. "Do you belong to me?" he declared, expressing his rage at her, and after a few minutes, he finished his round. After that he dressed and went to the guest bedroom, locking the door behind him. Tricia looked exhausted the next morning as she prepared to leave, wearing a scarf to conceal the marks on her neck and red eyes from a sleepless night. She grabbed her purse and walked towards the door. "Will you return after work?" Steve eyed after a long pause. Tricia opened the door without waiting for a response. "Will you come home later?" Steve pressed on, and she turned to face him with tears in her eyes. Tricia replied, "You're my husband. This is our home. Where else might I go? Do you want to talk about last night?" He insisted on shaking her head. Tricia muttered, "How not? Now that I'm late before leaving as Tricia was leaving?" Steve thought to himself that she'd rather meet her lover than talk to her husband. Is she really so concerned about me? What did I do to deserve this attitude toward me? Mike called Steve upon his arrival at work. "Hello, Stephen," I followed her. As you said, she parked in the mall near her office and waited for the guy as soon as he arrived. She got into his car and they headed north. Thank you, Mike. I'll keep you informed about what's going on between Trisha and me. Meanwhile, his wife had already entered the car. Why are you so reserved? You seem distracted. Are you not excited? Billy asked anxiously as they drove along the highway. This is Stephen. What's wrong with him? He was very assertive last night. It's not like him. What do you mean by assertiveness? He said things like, I was his property, I belonged to him. Trisha confessed to taking off her scarf, and it's all because of me. He left his mark on me. This morning, when I was leaving, he asked if I would come home after work. Does he suspect something? Does he suspect something? I don't know. We were careful. Perhaps he feels neglected. Perhaps I unknowingly failed to meet his expectations. Don't blame yourself, Trisha, but he doesn't deserve it. I'm cheating on him with his friend. It's just a physical attraction between us. You love him, I understand, but he won't understand. Do you want to go back? No, I just need a break. But without intimacy, I'm still in pain. I hope you understand, not a problem. Thanks, Billy. They should be at their destination by now, or somewhere nearby. Steve glanced at his watch. Will she give herself to Billy after what happened last night? He thought about it. He glanced at his watch from time to time, unable to get the image of Billy and his cheating wife out of his head. I can't wait for this day, he thought to himself. Suddenly, a sneaky smirk flashed on his face. He begged his supervisor for a long coffee break, citing vital personal affairs arriving at the cottage. Billy watched Trisha impatiently leap out of the car and ran to the green lake. It's so beautiful and calm here, Trisha murmured, closing her eyes and taking a long breath. I now see you smiling, Billy remarked, smiling back. Come here. Hug me tight. They hugged for a bit, until Billy proposed a walk along the shore. They were walking hand in hand, when Trisha's phone call interrupted the silence. Glancing at the caller ID, she disregarded the call. Steve asked Billy. Trisha nodded. A few moments later, the phone rang again. This time, Trisha turned it off. Steve shouted from his automobile, I'm sure that jackass agrees with her. He called another number. Mike, I need another favor from you, friend. What if he calls your workplace? Billy inquired. I had not considered that. Trisha confessed with a frown. I'll just say I took a personal day following what he did to me last night. Billy's phone rang simultaneously. I do not recognize this number. He informed Trisha. She cautioned against answering. It may be someone from headquarters or a prospective customer. Billy reasoned, tapping the green phone icon before he could even answer the call. A masculine voice spoke. Could you please ask Trisha to answer her husband's call? The call went dead. Billy stood transfixed, holding the phone to his ear. What happened? Who was it? Trisha seemed disturbed. Billy stuttered, and I couldn't identify his voice. What exactly did he say? Trisha grabbed his shoulders and shook him. He instructed you to answer Steve's call. My God, he knows everything. Trisha trembled. We need to go and switch on your phone. He dashed back to the car, and Trisha followed him. She turned on her cell phone, and it immediately rang. Is this him? Billy inquired, looking concerned. Answer it, Stephen, please. It's not as you think. Let me clarify, Trisha cried. There is nothing to explain. Steve yelled into the phone. Billy could hear him. I have known everything for weeks. Your work hours are flexible, and you have a day off next week to meet together. You're even wearing the black underwear he purchased for you. Please, Steve, listen to me enough. You are a disgrace. Listen up. Does he realize? I already have you. Now he can have you too. I'm throwing your belongings out and meeting with a lawyer today, loaded with evidence. Steve, please let's chat. No, it is done between us. Trisha broke into tears. Someone told me. Steve, manufactured your brief encounter at Motel 6, recorded. I have copies. You may star in your own film, TR. Tricia looked at Billy, scared. I love you, Steve. Do not push me away. Stop telling lies. Tricia, is this what you consider love? I apologize, Steve. Please give me another chance. Sorry for what I offered you a chance this morning. And you can time to see your lover. Now tell that jerk. I know where his wife Jenny works. I'm heading there with a DVD. He should meet me at the bank in 40 minutes. I want him to explain why I should not show Jenny the film. 40 minutes, not a second longer. Steve hung up and turned off his phone. Steve realized that clarity was difficult to come by in times of terror. Billy was in full disarray when Tricia informed him of Steve's plans. Get in the car, he shouted at Tricia. Try to contact him and urge him not to meet Jenny. He turned off his phone. Tricia sobbed. Try calling this man Billy, ordered redialing and handing Tricia his phone. Tricia glanced at the screen and noticed it was Mike, his best friend. But Mike did not respond. Let me try using my phone. Tricia suggested, damn it. He turned off his phone while Billy was driving at 100 km/h. You won't get there in 40 minutes, Billy. I can't let him wreck everything I've accomplished. Tricia glanced at him incredulously. When I call Jenny, I can't stress her out. She's 8 months pregnant? Damn it. As they approached the highway, Billy sped to more than 150 km/h. Who does he believe he is, your poor excuse for a husband? Billy grasped the steering wheel with desperation. He is not a coward, Billy. He's just worthless, incapable of satisfying his wife. These remarks cut profoundly. He's the most attractive man I've ever known. Really, and still, you ended up in bed with me. Why, Billy, Tricia snapped, do not behave as if I am the only one you have cheated on. You are disgusting. If I had known that it wasn't me, it would have been someone else. Billy interrupted. I'm sorry I phoned you back at all. Tricia whispered, tears flowing down her cheeks, but you didn't have any regrets about being in bed with me? Right, Billy was driving at 200 km/h, occasionally weaving between lanes to avoid traffic ahead. I sincerely hope we don't arrive. And Steve hands the DVD to your wife, who does not fulfill her husband's expectations. Could you kindly stay quiet? Billy shouted. She is worthless, causing her spouse to seek satisfaction elsewhere. You don't know what you're saying. I am certain I am not the first person you have cheated on. Jerk, if you keep nagging, I'll pull over and kick you out of the vehicle at the same time. The automobile rocked violently, making him tremble all over. Trish and Billy exchanged shocked looks as he attempted to slow down and move the car away, but it wouldn't move. The car collided with a railing and overturned. Both passengers shouted when the airbags deployed. The car slammed into a tree with fatal impact. A branch shattered the windshield and punctured the airbags where Billy was. Tricia was only injured after being smacked by a branch. The car was so wrecked that firefighters would have needed many hours to remove it. Later that day, Steve received a call from the police informing him that his wife had been in a car accident. She was receiving treatment at South Lake Hospital in Newmarket, a suburb north of Toronto. He pretended shock and worry by asking a few questions before being told to proceed to the hospital. He hastily drove to Mike's residence to deliver the news, causing Mike to worry and panic. What happens if the authorities discover that someone tampered with the bolts? Mike inquired. They will not, and you have done all required safeguards. There's nothing connecting us to the car. We should just be quiet. Then came the reaction. You were aware of the hazards when you asked me to make that call this morning. I had a hunch, Mike. You are disgusting. I did what was necessary, so what is the plan now? You will drive me to Newmarket. I do not want the police to find my stressed-out spouse driving alone. Most importantly, I need to play my part. An hour later, a nurse ushered Steve into the waiting room. After a few minutes, two police officers approached and sat near him. "Do you know?" Billy Wilson asked Officer Number 1. "Yes, he is an old high school friend, also our finances." Steve responded quietly. "Is he in good terms with your wife?" Policeman 2 inquired. "I'm not sure what you're asking. I mean, is their relationship more than a friendship?" Officer Steve scowled. "I don't understand. Did you know they were having an affair?" Policeman Number 1 pressed. "No, that cannot be. Tricia would not cheat on me. She would not do that." Steve stood up. "I need to see her." "I need to see my wife? Where is she?" "Your wife is an intensive care policeman." #1 informed him. "I was only informed that she was injured in an accident. What happened. Why is she in intensive care? She was involved in an automobile crash with Billy Wilson. Witnesses claim he was driving towards Toronto. He died instantly, and your wife has sustained terrible injuries before losing consciousness." She said, "Tell Steve, I'm sorry." "Excuse me." Steve broke down in tears. The nurse LED. "Steve, down the hall. The doctor wants to see you," she said, pointing. "Third door on the right. I am Dr. Martino. I am sorry for your wife's accident. Please take your seat." Steve wiped his eyes to ease her pain. "We have heavily sedated her." The doctor explained. "What I have to tell you is not easy. You have to be strong, Steve." The doctor's gaze is waiting for him to proceed. "Your wife has lost both her left foot and right eye. She suffered broken ribs and internal organ damage. Her head received a severe blow. I apologize. There is no hope for recovery." Steve looked down and shook his head. "She is on life support." The doctor emphasized that the decision is entirely up to you. "When can I speak with her?" Steve asked. His voice cracked. "She is unable to see, but she can hear simultaneously." A nurse entered the office and delivered documents to the doctor after reviewing and signing several pages. He handed them to Steve. "Please review these to ensure their accuracy. Once you've made a decision, print your name and sign alongside mine on the dotted line. You will need a pen." He gave one to Steve. When Steve entered the room, he found Tricia broken and lying in bed with machines and monitors beside her. He said, "It's Steve." Tricia struggled to extend her hand toward him. "I will not touch you. You've been injured, and things don't look good. This is the consequence of your actions, Tricia. We would not be here if you hadn't gotten involved with Billy." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "By the way he died in the accident, the monitor showed an irregular pattern. I fought for you, Tricia. I took blows to protect you. I'm ring my life. You saw me as a hero. So this is what I get. You're betraying me." Tricia tried to talk, but couldn't. "If you no longer love me, you should have been honest. I would have understood and let you go instead. You opted to deceive me, manipulate my emotions, and violate my trust. Thankfully, we don't have children together, and now you want me to forgive you. How can I?" With rage, Steve seized the document and signed where necessary. "He came into my home to sell life insurance and ended up kidnapping my wife." Tricia strained to breathe. "I am going to finish this. It is for the best." Steve grit his teeth once again. "I will never forgive you. Rot in hell. You deceptive person." Steve stood up and leaned close to her ear. He murmured, "I sabotaged his car last night, and I'll soon collect on your life insurance policy." The monitors went haywire, triggering alarms. Dr. Martino and two nurses hurried into the room. Steve delivered the documents to the doctor and nodded before leaving the room. Thank you for taking the time to hear today's story. If you enjoyed this essay, please like it and subscribe if you have not already. If you have a tale to share about your or someone else's circumstance, please do not hesitate to contact me. Take care.